Afternoon, sir. Can I call Mr. Mark Burley, please?
Hello, Mr.
Hello.
Burley.
Hello.
Can you see and hear me clearly?
Well, I can hear you. I can see you now. Yes, I could see a
Okay.
gentleman before, but
I'm the usher and I'm going to swear you in. So if you could just repeat after me, please. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Can you give your full name, please?
Yes, Mark Richard Burley.
Mr. Burley, I'm going to ask for your statement to be brought up on screen, and you should be able to see it. It's WITN 03850100. Is that your statement?
It's very blurred at my arm. That's better. Page 1 definitely looks good. Yeah,
Yes. And do you have a copy of it in front of you?
I do. Yes.
Yes. And on the 4th of January, is it right to say that you signed a statement of truth that was separate to that statement, but it confirmed the truth of the content of that statement?
I couldn't confirm the exact date. Is it on my signed copy? No, it's not on my copy either. I can't confirm the exact date, but it's around about that time, yes.
Yes. And is this statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is, yes.
Thank you. That statement will go into evidence, and the questions that I'll ask you today will be supplementary to that. That can be taken down for now. Thank you. Your statement is quite light on detail, so I'm going to start by asking you a little bit about your background. When were you first employed by the Post Office?
Oh, wow. 1985. It could have been. I started on the 31st of December, so I'm just thinking, was that 85 or 84? It might have been 84.
Okay. And what did you have another job before that, or was that?
I worked for Sainsbury's before that. Technically it was a part-time role, but I used to do full-time hours for them.
And can you give us an indication of the types of roles you held at the Post Office before becoming involved in HNGX, or what we know as Horizon Online?
Yep. I started off as a post office counter clerk. That was my first role. I then moved on to be an area manager support. I then moved on to be a branch manager at 3 different branches. I then moved on to an internal audit role, auditing various processes and systems across the business. I then moved on to be a retail network manager, essentially accountable for the performance of around about 35 of the largest post offices. I then moved into project work, held a number of project manager positions. And then in 2003, I set up a PMO function, project management office function, before becoming the HNGX program manager in 2005, which I held till 2009 before becoming head of delivery. And then I left it on a voluntary redundancy term in early 2011.
And was your role as head of delivery until 2011?
It was, yes.
Can you tell us what the role of head of delivery involves, briefly?
Essentially, it was to look across the whole of the technology delivery that Post Office were doing at that time. So H&G was one of those projects that came under that, but I was no longer the program manager for the program.
Thank you. You've said in your statement that you had program management qualifications. Did you have any other qualifications that are relevant, a computer science background or anything along those lines?
I didn't have a computer science background, no. I had lots of project manager qualifications, PMO qualifications, and as you say, program manager, business analyst qualifications, but not a computer science background, no.
I'm going to go broadly chronologically this afternoon. I want to start with Legacy Horizon. In your witness statement, you say you weren't aware of any faults with Legacy Horizon, but there were bugs that were investigated and fixed to the best of your knowledge. What do you see as the difference between a fault and a bug or a series of bugs?
Well, I'm not even sure I said that in my statement. Could you tell me why I said that in my statement? Because I wasn't that close to original Horizon. I was only on the periphery of original Horizon.
Well, your statement's quite brief on that. Let's have a look at page 2. So it's WITN 03850100. And it's the top 2 paragraphs that really address Legacy Horizon.
Yep. And point 6, that I wasn't aware of any.
So you say, I was competent in the use of Legacy Horizon and was involved in an assurance role over its development. I wasn't aware of any faults with Legacy Horizon, but was aware it was essentially a modified EPOS solution, and as such, errors in data input could be made with consequential impacts on weekly accounts. So that's a suggestion that human errors in input could have a consequential impact. As with any technology solution, bugs did occur, but these were investigated and fixed appropriately to the best of my knowledge. So you've distinguished there between faults and bugs.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to distinguish there is when original Horizon went live, I wasn't aware of any overarching faults with the system that could cause a real problem. A bug is something that may not be technically perfect, but doesn't cause a problem because there's either a workaround or it's not actually having a direct impact. So, for example, I would describe a bug in this sense to be something in Arial font rather than Times New Roman, for example. It doesn't have any real impact on the user. Are you still there?
So, yes, I am. So your evidence is that there were some problems, but they were ones that didn't really have any real impact on the user.
Oh, yeah, as I recall it, on the original Horizon system, it went through quite an extensive period of what they called acceptance. And that was validating that what the post office had asked for had indeed been delivered. And there were numerous examples, and I did support some of these, where there was a more serious error or a more serious bug, whichever word you want to use, that we would declare wasn't fit for acceptance. In other words, we weren't prepared for the system to go live whilst that bug persisted because it could have a more significant impact on a user.
And your evidence from a moment ago is that you had quite a peripheral role in relation to what we know as Legacy Horizon. Is that right?
I did. I just supported a few of the examples of working through the acceptance criteria.
I mean, we'll go through some of the documents, and your name does appear on quite a few documents concerning acceptance incidents in relation to Legacy Horizon. Let's look briefly at a couple by way of early background. We can look at FUJ 000584445. This is a document from March 1999. This is a model office testing document, and if we go over the page, it has you on the circulation list, and you're listed as being part of the TIP project. We know TIP as Transaction Information Processing.
That's right.
Do you remember your role in relation to that project?
I don't remember the detail of the role, but I would have been supporting it from a business assurance perspective, so making sure that the system that was being developed operated according to the required business controls.
So when it came to testing, you were part of the TIP project, and your role was in relation to the business requirements for the TIP project. Is that
Yes,
fair?
That's right.
And then we'll look at another document. It's POL 000900073. This is a document from June 1999. It's headed Horizon Project Acceptance Review Comment Sheet, and it has your name there in the top right-hand corner as part of a panel in relation to the acceptance review. Do you remember your involvement in that panel?
Well, this panel, this acceptance sheet, I don't recollect a panel as such, but this acceptance sheet would probably relate to one of the acceptance items that I was asked to look at.
Thank you, that can be taken down. We've heard a lot of evidence, including expert evidence, of serious problems during acceptance and the rollout of Horizon. Do you accept that there were serious problems during the period of your involvement in the acceptance process and rollout of Horizon?
So all I can say on that is that the elements of acceptance I was involved in, we did the right degree of due diligence and made the recommendation accordingly as to whether it would either be accepted into, as a minor bug that wouldn't cause an impact or needed to be fixed and therefore would be fixed before we proceeded.
Let's look at the ones that you were involved in, or the ones that certainly the documents show that you were involved in. Let's look at poll 000904778. This is a document that the inquiry is familiar with. And can we look at page 75? It's a list of various different acceptance incidents. I'm not going to spend too long on Legacy Horizon. I'll just take you through a few of these documents. So it's page 75, and that addresses acceptance incident 410. And I'm just going to read what it says about acceptance incident 410. It's got your name down as the owner there. And it says, TIP have detected an instance where transactions received in the daily transaction file are not represented on the electronic cash account at the weekend. The transactions missing from the cash account are associated with a product changing from core to non-core. Do you remember that acceptance incident at all?
I don't remember the incident, no. But that would have been in my view, a high priority incident that needed resolving.
And do you know why you're listed as the owner of that particular incident?
No, I can't tell you why I was listed as the owner. I may have been the one leading the investigation into it, but I can't recall that at this time, and that's 24 years ago nearly.
Yes. I mean, you would accept that issues with the cash account are quite fundamental to the workings of the Horizon system.
Absolutely critical. I would totally 100% agree, and that's why, as I suggested, if I was investigating this one, it would have a severity of, using the scale on the right, it would have a severity of high. It would absolutely have to be understood before it was, accepted to proceed, or indeed fixed. Until you get into the detail of these things, you don't know the ins and outs of what's truly happened. It could be that it was represented on a different line than the one it was expected to be on, just from a typo in the coding. But obviously that's part of the investigation that would need to take place on all these types of incident.
Can we look at poll 000303993, please? And this is now moving from July 99 to August 1999. This is an electronic memo from Ruth Holleran. Do you remember Ruth Holleran?
Yes, yeah.
And what was her role?
As I recall at this time, I think Ruth led the acceptance process, I believe. I couldn't be 100% certain on that, so it would need checking factually, please.
Thank you. And you're listed there. Can you see it? You're copied into that memo. Your name appears. This is a list of high impact, high severity acceptance incidences. If we can turn to page 3, please. Thank you. Could we just look at, in the second column, there's reference to 376. That's acceptance incident 376. It's something that the inquiry is quite familiar with now. And that relates to data integrity issues. It's described there as TIP-derived cash account not equal to electronic cash account received by TIP. As part of the TIP team, do you recall that particular acceptance incident at all?
No, I don't recall the specific incident, no. But clearly that would be a high severity issue that we would not want to go live with.
And having been we've seen part of that TIP team. Is that something that you would likely have been familiar with at the time?
Possibly. I can't remember the specifics of which ones I was asked to get involved with and which ones I wasn't. As I said, I was involved in some of the acceptance incidents, but only a subset.
If we turn over to page 5, we get to acceptance incident 410, which is the one that you were listed down as the owner of. And that's the second column. If that paragraph there could be expanded, please. It says 410. This incident was previously recorded under AI 376, so it appears that they were linked. However, as the effect is different, this now stands alone. It refers to a scenario resulting in the tip-derived cash account calculated from Pathway's daily transaction files exceeding the transaction totals in the Pathway cash account. Refer to description of AI 376 for more detail on this process. It is this latter cash account stream that feeds the POCL accounting process via CBDB. Does this assist you at all in recalling this particular acceptance incident?
Doesn't assist me in recalling the incident. No, all I can say is I'll repeat what I said, that anything that impacted the cash account and data potentially being missing would have to be fully explained before I would recommend proceeding. Now, as I say, I can't remember this specific one, but we'd have made investigations of both the Pathway solution and also the TIP solution.
Because that kind of an incident, that's not just a change from Times Roman numeral to another font.
No.
A significant.
This is something that, as I said, I did not manage or lead the acceptance process, but my recommendation would have been not to proceed with an incident like this being open.
You say would have been. Was it, or is that something you don't remember?
I can't recall. I mean, I can almost certainly say that I can sort of say my recommendation would have been not to proceed with this being open without a satisfactory explanation. I can certainly say that, as I'm on oath. I can't say anything about this specific because I don't recall it. But, looking at the detail, I'm, trying to be absolutely honest with you.
Thank you. Can we turn to page 6, please? Thank you. And if we look at the 4th column there, it summarises the current position and a concern of Post Office Counters Limited. It says, POCL also require evidence that integrity checks in support of R818/08 are sufficient for all business data. In the absence of this evidence, the integrity of the data that drives the central accounting process is in question. This incident is therefore adjudged high in line with AI 376 and AI 411. Is that consistent with what you've just told us about the significance of this kind of an acceptance incident?
That's absolutely exactly what I'm referring to. It would be adjudged high and we would not proceed.
Looking at this kind of a document, that can be taken down, thank you. It seems as though from early 1999, you were aware of the importance of accounting data and that issues were being experienced in this regard with the new system. Is that
during its development? Yes.
Can we look at poll 000-43681? And could we look at the second page of that, please? This was a management resolution meeting of the 12th of August 1999. You weren't at that. Sorry, if we could zoom out. Thank you very much. You weren't at this particular meeting, but it does address the acceptance incident that you were listed as the owner of, 410. Can we look at page 3, please? Thank you. And it's the first substantive line. It says POCL advised. If we could have a look at that or highlight just those two lines, please. It says, Pockle advised that they rate 410 and 411 as low, conditional on resolution of the controls proposed on 376. RH would provide further detail on this. So it seems as though 410 becomes a low issue because it was going to be in some way tied up with resolution of the controls proposed for acceptance incident 376.
Can you just zoom back out to the full page? Because I thought I saw on the page that might explain that. Yeah, if you look lower down the page under point 3, it says JD reported as follows. Pathway recognised that not all transactions have been harvested and sent to TIP. A provisional fix went in on the 2nd of August, and this has worked satisfactorily so far with the effect that all records had been sent. So my assumption would be at this stage, as I say, I'm trying to remember back over 23 years, but my assumption would be at this stage, so they put a fix in, we'd done some provisional early testing of that fix and all looked good. But naturally, on something so significant, we won't want to close it until we've done sufficient testing to be confident that it truly fixed. I'm sure you probably appreciate there's lots of different scenarios that contribute to a cash account. So we'd want to make sure all those scenarios are suitably tested.
Absolutely. And if we look at that paragraph, it then goes on to say, Pathway cannot guarantee, however, that all problems have been trapped. They'll need to see evidence from the fix of the 8 known problems and will continue to monitor the problem for 3 months to be confident of its resolution. Yep. So at that stage, they can't guarantee that all problems have been trapped. Has that been fixed or resolved?
No, as I say, we would want to do sufficient testing to have a degree of confidence that they have been, and then, as you say, keep it under monitor. You know, that's standard practice.
Do you recall that there was a second supplementary agreement in September of 1999 which permitted errors of up to 0.6% of all cash accounts? I'm
not aware of that at all, no.
Perhaps if we go to poll 000900428, and it's page 21, this is the second supplemental agreement between the Post Office and ICL. I mean, you may not have seen this because this is a contractual document. I don't know if this jogs your memory at all.
I think it's one of the documents that have been sent, but I wasn't party to this and I don't recall it. If I'm just looking.
If we look at the small one, there is a period in which the percentage of cash accounts received by Pockle across the TIP interface containing cash account discrepancies shall not exceed 0.6% of all such cash accounts. Is that something?
It's not something I'm aware of, and you know, I can interpret what it may mean, but I may be taken out of consequence. This could refer to the fact that we wouldn't pay for Jitsu, or Pathway as they were called then, you know, unless it was within that parameter. But that's not saying that 0.6% was acceptable, because I can't believe we'd have agreed to anything being acceptable. It's my personal view.
Was there, do you recall, an acceptance that there would still be some degree of cash account discrepancies moving forward?
No, there definitely was no acceptance of that. There may have been an acceptance that we believe the fix had resolved the issue, but there is inevitably a risk that something else does arise, because you cannot test the system to a degree where you can 100% hand on heart say it will never occur again. And that's what this may relate to, that it is, you know, such a rare transaction or rare sequence of events that causes it, that it would be 0.6%. But I can't believe we accepted, or anybody would have signed up to accepting that there could be discrepancies on a cash account. That was the fundamental accounting document to which all branches were held.
Were you still part of the TIP team at this stage? So this is 24th of September 1999.
I honestly can't recall if I was on tip or on a project at this stage. I'm guessing I would have still been on tip, look, because it's only a couple of months after the last document you showed me.
Would you have been expected to have been consulted about a contractual agreement of this kind, given
No.
your involvement in tip and being responsible for business aspect of tip?
I think the answer would be yes if it referred to an ongoing allowance, but no if it refers to an allowance, over the period of time such that we would pay halfway as long as they met this criteria, but wouldn't accept it as an incident. So I personally believe that's what it would be. It would be a contractual payment term, not a business acceptance term. Otherwise, I would expect to be consulted, yes.
Do you remember a third supplemental agreement, or were you aware of a third supplemental agreement on the 19th of January of 2000?
I wasn't aware of a second, so no, I wasn't.
Let's just look at that. That's FUJ 00118186. And I'll only take you to that document very briefly. And it's page 4 of that third supplemental agreement, that it addresses enhanced integrity control, which was something that was implemented to address the concerns relating to the cash account that we've already gone through. Do you remember something called the enhanced integrity control at all?
No, nothing that I would have dealt with would have been called the enhanced integrity control. It might have been called a fix. It might have been, the process they were coding to ensure that the cash account was robust. But I don't remember it being called an enhanced integrity control.
If we go over the page, it's paragraph 5.3 of the next page that the inquiry has spent some time over previously in phase 2. This seems to be an agreement. I'll read it to you. It says, the contractor shall, from the date of this agreement until the end of the tip integrity check period, make available to POCL, promptly upon request, appropriate experts to explain to POCL the contractor's analysis of all root causes of cash account discrepancies and the measures which the contractor shall have implemented in order to prevent the recurrence of any cash account discrepancies which would not have been detected by the accounting integrity control release. Do you recall at all there being a likelihood that there would be cash accounting discrepancies which couldn't be detected by a control that was put in place?
I don't recall anything, no, because the tip system was designed to ensure that what was sent in reconciled with the two sides fully reconciled. So no, I don't recall that at all. Not that, in other words, I don't recall that it wouldn't have been detected. So I'm unclear what that refers to.
Do you recall an acceptance that because of the nature of the system, there would always be a degree of unreliability with the cash account?
Can you, just phrase that question again?
Sure. Were you aware, or do you recall, that because of the nature of the system, there was an acceptance that there would always be a degree of unreliability in the cash account, however small?
No, I don't agree that. I don't accept that. The cash account is only formulated from all the inputs to it, and there's no reason that it would ever have to accept or be prone to errors. There's no reason. Effectively, every transaction that is done over a post office counter has a double entry on the cash account.
Can we look at poll 000285007, please? We've now reached January of 2000, and this is an email, the bottom email, that is sent by you to Min Burdett regarding something called receipts not equal to payments. That's what we know as acceptance incident 211, where the receipts and payments didn't equal on the cash account.
Yeah.
Again, do you remember being involved in that issue?
I vaguely remember this one, yes.
Because that's obviously quite a significant thing if the receipts and payments don't match. What's your recollection of that?
It's as it says on the subject, the receipts weren't equal to payments, and the fundamental thing about the cash account is your receipts payment and your payments total have to match, and any then balancing entry between the two is the amount of loss or gain for the week in question. And typically every branch would make, a few pence, a few pounds potentially difference on a weekly basis. You accidentally give out, a 20p instead of a 10p, so you've got a 10p discrepancy straight away. And there were, if I recall at the time, there were examples where it genuinely happened because, and I think it was books of stamp, if they bought 10 stamps, they got a slight discount as a customer, but it went in effectively at the price. So the sub postmaster would make, I don't know, 10 pence, 15. I can't remember what the product was, so don't quote me on stamps, please. But there was a product that was sold where if you bought in bulk, you got a bit of a discount, but it worked in favour that you made actually a slight profit on those. So that's the fundamental part of the cash account. The two columns are totaled, and any difference is your loss or gain on the week. It becomes a balancing entry.
We've gone through quite a few of those acceptance incidents, and am I right to say that your evidence, certainly your oral evidence today, is that despite those, as far as you were aware, the cash account was flawless upon acceptance and rollout?
I believe the cash, my recommendation would be that all cash account errors as part of the development have to be either 100% explained and therefore understandable and wouldn't cause an issue to any integrity, or ideally completely fixed ahead of any rollout.
Thank you, that can come down. In the passage I took you to earlier from your witness statement, you said that the system was essentially a modified EPOS solution. Were you aware of any concerns about the EPOS system and the coding of the EPOS system, for example?
It depends what you mean by was I aware of any concerns. During the development, there were, numerous defects identified, that would have been identified through testing, some of it identified through pathways on testing, some through post office testing, and they would all go in as part of, ultimately to try and get fixed, and ultimately against the acceptance criteria if they remain open.
What point in time did this all get resolved, do you think?
To the best of my knowledge, and from my part in it, I believe it was all resolved before certainly any extended trial was done. There may have been a few small issues outstanding at the onset of the first trial. I can't 100% confirm they weren't, but sometimes that does happen. But before it went out to any extended number of sites, I would believe they would all be resolved such that integrity-wise, it was robust.
If we've heard evidence to the contrary, would that surprise you?
It would surprise me as far as my involvement would go. I would just say one thing. Of course, the system, once the system is live, it's not completely left alone because we do, like most systems, you develop new products, so you do make changes to it. So it's, could something have happened after that? I can't comment for certain, but possibly. But if you're saying to me, original integrity issues were allowed to be rolled out, excuse me, were allowed to be included in the rollout, I'd be 100% surprised and shocked.
At the beginning of your evidence today, you said that you had quite a peripheral role in Legacy Horizon. Having looked at those documents and your name on various documents, including ownership of an acceptance incident, do you think that was underplaying things somewhat?
No, because I wasn't looking at the development of the Horizon system as a full-time role. You know, I was involved with acceptance, but I wasn't leading acceptance. I was potentially, you might describe it as leading a few of the items under acceptance.
Once you had finished your work on the acceptance of Legacy Horizon, did you go on to a different role before getting involved in what we know as Horizon Online?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to move on now to the development of HNGX. We'll see in documents we're going to come to references to a medium volume pilot and a high volume pilot. Can you tell us briefly what that means, what the difference is between the two?
It's just the scale of which we would roll out to the number of sites. So I can't remember the numbers, but a medium volume pilot might be extending from an initial pilot of 10 sites up to, let's say 150, 200 sites. And the high volume would be where we're migrating from that and perhaps doing 100 sites a night to roll out the entire estate.
And you weren't a technician, you weren't, as you have explained, you didn't have a computer science background or anything of that sort. What was your role in relation to the pilots? Was it driving things forward?
So my role as H&G ex-program manager was to ensure we delivered a quality system.
Let's start in January 2010. Can we look at FUJ 000927754? This is a document from the 28th of January 2010. And it's the notes of the Horizon Next Generation Joint Progress/Release Board meeting. And you are listed there as chair of this meeting. Can you tell us what was this board? What was its purpose?
So the purpose of this board, it was a weekly meeting to discuss the progress of the development, you know, and obviously development leading into testing, leading into deployment of the new Horizon Next Generation system. So it's a weekly meeting we held jointly with Fujitsu to discuss anything to do with ongoing development activities.
Can we look at page 3, please? Thank you. And it's the first shaded entries. We have there AD, that's Alan Dalvarez. Do you remember Alan Dalvarez?
Alan, yes.
Yes, he was, he worked at Fujitsu, is that right?
He did, yes. Yeah.
He's listed there as Program Director, HNG, Fujitsu. I'm going to read that third column. It says, the delay in the commencement of volume testing means that we will not be able to perform a significant amount of testing before commencing the medium volume pilot. Hence, we will need a significant amount of data to be collected from the live branches and data center. The data will also require careful and thorough analysis. AD to confirm how this will be achieved. Do you recall there being less testing than originally planned before going to pilot?
No, there wasn't less testing. We may have varied how we did the testing, but there wasn't less testing. One thing that was very, very clear on Horizon Next Generation was that quality was the utmost importance. With any project that is delivered, you generally have 3 criteria. You have the time it takes to deliver it, the cost to deliver it, and the quality criteria that it must meet. I can honestly say as program manager, the quality criteria was the utmost of those 3. Inevitably, there's always a little focus on all 3, and the amount of focus varies from project to project, but quality was the most important. And, you know, I know several times throughout the development and testing of the solution, we paused, we took a step back, because of testing, because of we couldn't get the right data or whatever, to absolutely make 100% sure that we've got the right answer before proceeding.
Thank you. That's what you've said in your statement. But if we look at this particular entry, the delay in the commencement of volume testing means that we'll not be able to perform a significant amount of testing before commencing the medium volume pilot. What do you understand that to mean?
Well, I took that to mean that we've got a different way of doing it, because we've actually got, if you look on the right, Dave Johns was leading on it, and LF is Lee Farman. Lee Farman was my test lead at the time, and, you know, I would have taken, you know, his advice on this, that if he said, you know, he was comfortable that the slight change to the approach on testing gave him sufficient confidence, then that was acceptable, and that's why it would have been closed. Because you'll see data has been passed to Lee Farman. Lee Farman believes this is adequate for now.
It doesn't, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it doesn't seem to suggest that there's a different type of testing. What it seems to suggest is that there won't be a significant amount of testing, and instead there's going to be a collection of data. Am I wrong on that?
It depends how you want to read it. Lee has looked at the data that has been collected from the existing sites by, you know, from looking at this detail here, and has satisfied himself that what we needed to be assured through the testing has actually been done. Now, whether that's through a test or through the data that has effectively been through the system, it's given us the same result, is what that is telling me in the fourth column.
Forgive me for, I don't quite understand what you're saying there, because I mean, certainly a plain reading of that is there won't be a significant amount of testing, and instead there's going to be provision of data. Am I wrong to think that there is a difference between getting hold of data and actual testing, or are you saying they're the same thing?
They're clearly different things, but the data can give you the proof that what you'd have done in the testing is actually sufficient. So the data can give you the same proof, is what I'm saying.
So is data, collection of data, an adequate and an equivalent to a significant amount of testing, or is it less than a significant amount of testing?
In this particular scenario, it was clearly considered to be an equivalent to the test.
And what gives you that impression?
Because Lee Farman, who was a robust external tester, so he wasn't post office, he wasn't pathway, he was actually brought in from external, gave me that confidence and would have explained it to me at the time.
It says they're adequate, though. It doesn't say equivalent. Adequate seems to be less than significant testing, doesn't it?
Well, I think the testing at any point, it's adequate for now. You'd want to do more testing before you went into a high volume pilot, is what that's saying. It's adequate to get into the medium volume pilot. That's what it's saying. It depends on your interpretation of the word adequate. The way I read that is it's adequate for now. In other words, Lee is happy that it gives us what we need for the medium volume pilot.
If somebody were to say that you, at this stage, were desperate to get on with the medium volume pilot, would that be right?
No, that would definitely be wrong, because nobody ever put me under pressure to get on with anything. We were always wanting to progress to timescales, but we wanted to progress to timescales in the right way.
Was the impression that you got from Post Office more broadly, rather than just yourself, one that you were desperate as a company, as an organisation, to get on with the medium volume pilot?
Absolutely, I totally refute that suggestion, and that is 100% factually not correct. At times, you know, there were times definitely when, you know, people would say to me, you know, why are we not ready? And I would explain why we're not ready. And at no point under my time as H&G program manager was I under pressure, or as delivery manager, was I under pressure to hit a timescale at the expense of quality. I would be expected to explain it in certain situations, but never under pressure.
Thank you. That can come down. In your statement, you say at paragraph 18, with any computer system, there's always likely to be bugs, and this is the purpose of testing. Less testing might mean more bugs, mightn't it?
In theory, yes, but not necessarily in practice. With testing, what you do, you agree an approach to testing. You have a strategy and an approach for a specific phase of testing, if you like, that gives you sufficient confidence. Now, with any system, I would suggest it's almost impossible to be 100% guaranteed that no further bugs remain. But you do sufficient testing, depending on what it is you are developing, rolling out, deploying, that gives you the confidence it will work satisfactorily against what it's intended to do. So obviously something like a space rocket, you would do much more testing on. So you vary the testing according to what it is you're developing. It's a standard approach called a risk-based approach to testing. But you cover off the things that are absolutely going to cause any risk.
If you had intended to carry out significant testing, and that was replaced with a lesser form of testing or a different or a collection of data, might that mean that there may be more bugs?
No, because in that scenario, as I've said, Lee has affirmed that what he saw in the data gave us the same result as he would have expected from testing to move into that medium volume pilot. That was the key of that bit. It was to move into that medium volume of pilot, and it was to look at the performance of the system. And performance in that sense would be, is it holding up speed-wise to be able to process transactions? It's not functional.
Can we just go back to FUJ 0009274, page 3? Thank you. Does Lee there say that it gives the same result?
Is that a question for me?
Yes. Yeah, your evidence was that Lee has said to you that the collection of data rather than significant testing gives the same result. But I was just wondering if that's your recollection or if that's something that's stated there.
Well, yeah, in my opinion, I mean, obviously this is written by a PMO who takes the notes and their choice of wording. Now, can I edit the wording? Of course I can. As program manager, anybody can challenge the wording in hindsight. But my absolute recollection is Lee is saying this is adequate for now for what we would have tested to get into the medium volume pilot. That's what I am recalling on this one. We wouldn't have gone into that medium volume pilot without a sufficient confidence.
Can we look at polls 50874, please? This is the Fujitsu Zone Testing and Integration Strategy. Thank you. If we have a look at this document, it's a Fujitsu document, but if we look at the bottom, it has external distribution, and it's something that has been sent to the Post Office Library. And Andrew Thompson, do you know Andrew Thompson? Do you recall who he was?
Yeah, Andrew was one of the test leads with Lee. Andrew primarily, if I recall correctly, Andrew primarily looked after functional and Lee looked after non-functional performance.
Can we look at page 12 of this strategy? And it's paragraph 1.25 on page 12 that I'd like to look at. Make that larger if possible. So this is Fujitsu's testing strategy, and it says, as a general philosophy, it's important to accept that no system can ever be confirmed as completely error-free. It's not possible to prove it. Tests can prove that an error exists. They can prove that a previous error has been corrected. They cannot prove that no further errors remain. However, by concentrating on the important characteristics of the system operation, tests can be used to demonstrate the progressive removal of errors to the point where these characteristics are seen to conform to expectation. So testing can be seen as a method, the primary method, of reducing the risk of serious defects remaining in important areas of the system. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, that's the risk-based approach to testing that I referenced a couple of minutes ago.
Yes. So it says testing there is the primary method of reducing the risk of serious defects. It doesn't say there that gathering data is an adequate replacement for testing, does it?
Well, it doesn't say it, no.
If Fujitsu had the impression, rightly or wrongly, that Pol were desperate to get on with the pilot, and as a consequence reduced the testing, what kinds of problems would you envisage?
Well, Fujitsu couldn't reduce our testing. They could reduce their testing, but not our testing.
And if any testing was reduced because of an impression, rightly or wrongly, that was given that you needed to get on with the pilot, what was the risk in that?
Well, but it wasn't. Testing wasn't reduced because we were under pressure to get on with the pilot.
I'll ask once more, if it was, what would the risk be? Reading that, what is the risk of reducing testing?
Well, the risk is you're risking more bugs going forward.
Thank you. Can we look at FUJ 000971159, please? We're still on the 28th of January, and this seems to be a different board meeting. This is called the Horizon Next Generation Release Authorization AG3 Joint Board. How is this board different? Do you remember this board?
This will have been the board, I vaguely remember it. This will be the board that looked at, very similar to the acceptance on original Horizon. This is the board that looks after, are we ready to authorize the release of Horizon into the branches?
And can you tell us what AG Acceptance Gateway 3 was?
I can't remember what AG3 was. I'm assuming it was, looking at the date, probably entry into pilot, but I can't be 100% certain.
Can we turn over the page? And it has their new actions and points to note from combined meeting of the 21st of January 2010, acceptance. It's that first shaded section that I'd like to look at first. It says there, DC, that's I think Dave Cook, the Fujitsu acceptance manager, confirmed that there are no outstanding high severity acceptance incidents and that all other thresholds are within tolerance for acceptance gateway 3. And I just want to look at the third paragraph. It says, however, it was agreed that the high priority fixes in Reset 4 to be delivered as part of maintenance release 0108 could constitute a high severity AI if not delivered in time for the high volume pilot over 272 branches. And then if we scroll down to the next entry, it seems clear from that there weren't any outstanding high severity acceptance incidences, but as we've heard, there's the potential for there to be one.
It strikes me from that there was high severity acceptance incidents that had been fixed, but the fix hadn't actually been deployed yet, reading those words, and therefore was subject to fully being signed off, if you like.
And then we have a look at that final entry. It says non-high priority items in Reset 04. MB, I think that's yourself, offered an option to remove items from Reset 04, which are not regarded as high priority, if they are at risk of missing the high volume pilot deadline or affecting the delivery of items which are high priority. AD will consider if any items are at risk, so that's Alan Dalvarez will consider if any items are at risk and liaise with Post Office. Is this something you remember at all?
I don't recall it, not as such.
It seems as though that you're offering there to remove some items from what's called Reset 4, which weren't regarded as high priority.
Yeah, and that's quite possible. If there were things on there that weren't high priority and therefore weren't considered material risk, then to proceed through this gateway. And don't forget, I think it's important to recall that when we're in a pilot, you're getting more evidence from the pilot of any potential problems. So, we would have, looked at anything that wasn't classed as high priority and said, is that material to proceeding to the next phase? It's not saying we're actually going to remove them, it's saying we'll look at removing them.
And was that because the priority at that stage was to get the high volume pilot going and get on with acceptance given previous historic delays?
No. The priority was to deliver a quality system. But with any system, you would look at the lower priority items and say, is this important for moving forward at this stage? Yes, no. And you'll see there that it is being progressed by the Pole and Fujitsu testing and requirement teams. So we wouldn't have put anything, given an exception to anything that we didn't get approval from.
Absolutely, but were you making it easier there for Fujitsu so that they could meet the high volume pilot deadline by removing non-essential items?
Not easier, no. It's a standard, approach to saying we need to look at the items on the list that are outstanding.
So again, at this stage, still 28th of January, would it be unfair, I think you've said yes before, to say that you were desperate to get on with the pilots?
Would it be unfair? Yes, it would be unfair. Yeah, I mean, I think the word you're using there is desperate to get on with. Keen to get on with, I'd say, is fair, but desperate, definitely not.
Can we look at page 9 of this document? And it's the bottom of page 9 that I'd like to look at. New actions and points to note from the combined meeting of the 28th of January. I'm going to read to you the first 3 entries. So the first one, branch trading statements at Cotton House and Warwick. It was confirmed that on-screen error messages had occurred at both offices, which meant that their branch trading statements could not be completed. The root cause position at Cotton House was understood, but the Warwick office had additional complexities. It was confirmed, however, that in both cases the underlying data integrity and external feeds to POL MI and POL MS were not affected. Next entry, double settlement at Derby. In addition to the above, there have been 2 instances of a transaction appearing to be settled twice. This was picked up by the standard reconciliation process and corrected via BAU processes. However, the root cause is yet to be identified and investigation is underway. The third entry, decision, postponement of the next 10 branches. Based on the lack of a known root cause for AG 3.70, so AG 3.70 is the branch trading statements issue, and AG 3.71, that's double settlement issue, it was agreed that the next 10 branches should be postponed until the impact and way forward is fully understood. Do you recall those issues at this time?
I recall the Warwick and Coton issue. I vaguely recall, I don't recall the Derby specifically, but I recall a double settlement, yes. And I think the decision in 372 absolutely reaffirms, this was not a time pressure. This was, getting it right. And I can explain to you the 371 and 370 if you like, if that helps.
Well, we may get onto them, but your evidence is that 28th of January, the postponement of the next 10 branches shows that you weren't in a rush to get on with things. Is that?
It shows we weren't pressured into getting on with things, yes.
Can we look at FUJ 000 92875? And it's page 3 of that document. Thank you. This is an email from Alan Alvarez of Fujitsu of the 3rd of February, so very shortly after that, just a few days later. This is, I believe it's an internal Fujitsu email, but do correct me if I'm wrong on that. Do you recognise the names there? You're not copied into that.
I think they're all Fujitsu resources, yes.
Thank you. Let's look at point 1. It says the decision has been taken to deploy HNGX to a further 10 branches, with a migration button being pressed tomorrow for migration to complete Friday. So the decision to postpone due to, for example, the branch trading statement issue that we just saw and the double settlement issue that we just saw seems just a few days later to have been reversed. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that.
Yes. And then we look at point 2. There are 2 issues that require fixing prior to being able to enter into a medium volume pilot. The first, branch trading statement. This is where the in-day migration process that happens once a branch hits the migration button is not correctly migrating across the summary data. This data is used to produce the branch trading statement. The base data is being migrated correctly and therefore the central accounting is unaffected. However, should a post office manager do a trading statement in branch, there is a high chance that the statement produced, which uses the summary data, will not reconcile. We are manually fixing the summary data prior to the BTS being run for those branches already migrated. Just pausing there, what do you understand by manually fixing the summary data?
So basically, when the branches were migrated onto H&G, it was an automated system that migrated the data from their existing solution onto Horizon Next Generation. And this was an error that occurred in certain circumstances. So what happened, we identified the root cause of the error, and what happened was Fujitsu knew where it was, but we decided to continue with the 10 because this migration process, obviously, it only happens when you migrate a branch. So, the best test for this is when you migrate a test, but you just need to make sure you've absolutely got a control total, which you can then manually fix should any of the data not migrate successfully. That's what that manually fixing meant.
But how would it be manually fixed?
Well, by the migration team comparing what should be there with what's actually there, and then making the appropriate entry onto the Horizon system so that can be re-migrated onto Horizon Next Generation.
So would the entry that's created by Fujitsu technicians show up on the branch trading statement as a different figure?
I can't remember how it actually worked in terms of the correction, I'm sorry.
Moving to the second one, counter pauses in live. Yesterday and today, a number of branches reported screen freezes while operating HNGX. So you have 2 issues there that require fixing before entering into the medium volume pilot. And then paragraph 3, it says, currently, the team is still investigating both issues above and as yet have not determined the root cause for either. Do you remember that at that stage?
I remember that, yeah.
And then it's paragraph 4 that I want to spend a bit of time on. And it says, we had a meeting with Post Office this evening, which Mark Burley led from the Post Office side. Post Office are desperate for a date to start planning/rescheduling medium volume pilot. They accepted our position that we're not able to give this today. I expect that Mark will be keeping Dave Smith briefed, and my reading is that if we are not in a position to give a target date by close of play tomorrow, it is likely to result in an escalation to Mike Young. So that's where we get the phrase desperate from. Was Alan Dalvarez wrong when he said that you were desperate?
I don't know why you use that word, so I think that's a question for Alan.
Was there pressure being put on Fujitsu by the Post Office and by yourself to get on with things?
Not to the extent that it would be desperate. We clearly for the migration we have to plan and schedule the migrations. So we have to give the officers that are due to migrate due notice because we would do that out of hours typically. They may need resources in place. They have to, prepare themselves for that migration. So, in terms of, we would want a date that we are targeting. Now, whether that date was tomorrow or next week or next month, we want a date because we want to start the planning process, not desperate to get it going necessarily. I think it's not a term I would have used. We need a date such that we can continue with our planning rescheduling exercise.
Can we keep that on the screen, but just put alongside it your witness statement, WITN 03850100, and it's page 4 of your witness statement, paragraph 16. Thank you. So it's paragraph 16. You say there is program manager. The one person who would have been under pressure to migrate to HNGX quickly would have been myself. Through demonstrating how we as a team were holding Fujitsu to account on quality, there was never any pressure to migrate before we had signed off readiness. Do you see the contrast there between what you've said in your witness statement and what Mr. Dalvarez was saying at the time?
No, I don't. I'm sorry, but you're reading that different to how I'm reading it. Post offices are desperate for a date to start planning rescheduling. It doesn't say we're desperate for a date that has to be imminent. At no point, I repeat, at no point was I put under pressure from a timescale perspective. I think it's just how you're choosing to read the two statements are different.
By that stage, how long had HNGX been planning for?
It depends what you mean by planning. It had been running for, if this was February, the best part of 3.5 years.
And was one of the reasons you were brought into the project to drive things forward?
Sorry, was it what? Sorry?
Was one of the reasons that you were brought into the project to drive things forward?
In the sense that the program manager drives anything forward, yes.
Do you not think that Fujitsu might have felt some time pressure by this stage?
I think that they felt time pressure for themselves, yes.
But your evidence is that that pressure wasn't coming from the post office.
As I said, what is said and how things are interpreted can be two different things. Would I have said, Alan, come on, I need a day, we need to start, and get these replanned, rescheduled? Yes, I probably would say something like that. But, there's a difference saying that and saying, come on, Alan, I need to get these started again tomorrow. We're already behind plan. That is definitely not something I would have said. And you'll notice there, they accepted our position that we're not able to give this today. And yes, I would want to keep them, under a little bit of attention that we're wanting a date, because as I said, scheduling and planning the branches, it wasn't a dead straightforward task. It takes time. You have to accommodate, things that the office might have planned, and, we had to share appropriate evidence with other parties who were, for example, with the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, who I brought in to also give assurance before we deployed.
Thank you. So that might be an appropriate moment to take our 15-minute break.
All right, 15 minutes.
20 past 3?
20 past-ish, I suppose, to be imprecise for once.
Thank you.
Have a short break, Mr. Burley, all right? We have a break in the afternoon and in the morning because the person transcribing the evidence needs a break, all right?
Okay, thank you. Do I dial off or?
No, mute yourself and go off screen and go for a walk, but don't break the connection, all right?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burley. We're back. I'm going to return to the issue of the BTS, the branch trading statement. And can we look at FUJ 000942268, please? We're still in February of 2010. And this is an email chain. It's an email chain that's not ideal from a formatting perspective, so it may take us a little bit of time to go through. This is page 10, and you'll see there is an email from Jeff Butts, and if you look down, it is to Will Russell, yourself, and Barry Evans. Who are the other two?
Will and Barry led the migration activity.
Thank you. And if we scroll down and over the page, there's the email from Jeff Butts. He says both. This is to confirm the position on a fix for the BTS, the branch trading statement issue, whereby printing the trial balance report for BTS results in incorrect data being displayed in the final balance report. A fix can be delivered and tested for inclusion within the 0108 maintenance release as a counterfix. In the meantime, branches need to use the BTS trial balance report, which is correct, and discard the BTS final balance report, which is incorrect. Do you remember this issue?
Vaguely, yes. I think it's linked to the one we talked about before.
So we saw the one related to Cotton House and Warwick.
No, this is the one relating to the migration and the incorrect when they migrate. This will be because they used to run a BTS branch trading statement when they'd migrated the data to prove that it had migrated correctly.
And here the suggestion is that a workaround is possible until it can be fixed. And
yeah.
You respond, it's page 9 is your response. And you say there, Jeff, thanks, but can I ask who you have agreed this workaround with? This is a legal document, and there is a difference between a trial balance and a final balance. I would also expect CS, is that customer service or?
I'm guessing so.
To have a KEL, known error log for this, if agreed, to be able to explain the position to any sub-postmaster who calls in. Graham, to confirm, please. Do you remember this response?
Well, vaguely, yes. I mean, it is a long time ago, but vaguely I remember it. Yeah, I mean, it's back to the cash account. It's basically, it's their accounts.
And can you tell us what you're saying there?
Well, basically, I'm saying that why do you rely on the trial balance and not the final balance? Because the final balance ultimately is the one that's important. Now, I don't know what his response was on this, but it might be it was just on the printout that it was causing the problem and not on the actual system stored data. You'd still expect there to be a known error log, even if it is just on the printout.
And that's so that the message can be communicated to sub-postmasters that there is a problem with quite a significant document that, as you've said, there is a legal document or used in legal proceedings.
100%. And don't forget, I think it's worth pointing out at this stage that we had a sub-postmaster group as part of our release authorization process. I brought in the part of the NFSP to support and be comfortable with what we were doing. So they would also, I'd expect them to sign it off as well.
So are you saying that they would have known about this specific issue?
Yes, because they were, absolutely. I brought the NFSP in because I wanted them to be comfortable with what we were doing and what we were deploying.
And how would you share this kind of information?
Well, we had tripartite meetings with them, and I would just share it open and honestly because they need to be clear. What I typically do is in something like this is ask for some sort of demonstration of what's happening, and for them to sign up to that it's either okay, or actually, if I didn't think it was okay, I might not even share it because there's no point sharing something that I've said no. If we agree it's not fit for purpose with Fujitsu and they have to put a full fix in for the final balance, And that's why I'm asking the question I'm asking, you know, who they've agreed it with.
So you do recall or don't recall this specific issue being mentioned to the NFSP?
I don't recall whether this specific issue was mentioned to the NFSP or not.
Can we look at page 7? It's been escalated to Alan Alvarez within Fujitsu, or sent to Alan Alvarez. And it says there, sorry, it's the page before, thank you. It says, Alan, just rang Jeff, but he's on leave. Would you be able to help with this one, please? Would you please send any history regards this issue, specifically what the difference is in the final report are, and can you advise how Fujitsu have established that the trial report is correct and that there is no corruption of the data? A speedy response would be appreciated, as I need to explain this issue to our finance colleagues in more detail. And that's from Phil Norton, who's at the post office. That's a colleague of yours.
Yes, he used to work for me on Horizon Next Generation, yeah.
Yes. So what's happening with these branch trading statements is it's the final report that is wrong, but there is another report earlier on in the sequence that is right, and that they want to place reliance on that earlier report rather than the final report.
But what it doesn't tell us here is if that's the system report or just the printed version.
Yes. Can we look at page 4, please, which is an email from Gareth Jenkins of the 19th of February to Phil Norton, copied to Alan Alvarez. Thank you. So, as I said, they're laid out slightly strangely, but if we go over the page, that's the substance of that email. It says, Alan Alvarez has asked me to respond to your concerns below. I'll try to explain the issue and what has caused it. I assume you've seen the attached write-up of the issue, which was sent to Barry Evans. To expand on this a bit further, when the BTS is being produced, it is done based on data written to the branch database whenever a stock unit rolls over. BTS production retrieves the data from BRDB to the counter. The counter then uses it to generate the trial BTS. There is a bug in the way that the report is produced, such that some of the in-memory copy of the data is overwritten when the trial BTS is produced. A consequence of this is that when the final BTS is produced, it is using incorrect data. The problem has been fixed by ensuring that the final BTS uses the original data retrieved by the counter at step 2 rather than the data left over after step 4. The problem was first reported by Warwick, so that's the issue that we saw earlier, that originally paused the rollout to further branches, but that was quickly resumed. And they pointed out that the trial balance figures were correct and the final balance figures were incorrect. Comparing the trial and final balance figures with the corresponding stock unit balance reports shows easily that the trial balance is correct and the final balance is incorrect. None of the incorrect data is stored to BRDB, so there's no possibility of ongoing corruption of stock levels. Does this clarify the situation for you? So what do you understand the issue to be in simple terms?
Well, I understand it to be some sort of corruption between the trial balance and final balance that isn't actually corrupting the data, but it's corrupting the way the data is being reported, such that the final balance hasn't got the correct data on it anymore, but it's not actually impacting the balances carried forward. And if that's the case and has been validated as the case, and that it doesn't invalidate the data going forward, then I guess that may have been acceptable. But as I say, I don't remember the detail of, I'm assuming that would have been tested and proven to be correct before we'd have made the decision to accept this. Phil would also have checked with his finance colleagues in what was known as PMBA, pension and branch accounting, I think, something branch accounting, to validate that they were comfortable there was no risk of corruption.
We'll see what happens. We can look at another response from Gareth Jenkins. That's page 2. Just pausing there briefly, what was your relationship like with Gareth Jenkins?
I didn't have a real relationship with Gareth, to be honest.
What did you know or understand his role to be?
I couldn't recall what his role was at this time. I'm guessing he was some sort of analyst within the Fujitsu team. That's why he's responding to Phil.
You raised earlier in the email chain the issue of this being a legal document. Did you have any discussions at any time with him about legal proceedings?
No.
Were you aware of his involvement in legal proceedings at all relating to the Horizon system?
No.
So this is the response from him. Now, this one is slightly difficult to understand, and it may need a bit of explaining from me. The indented parts of this are Phil Norton's email that Gareth Jenkins is responding to. So where he says Phil and then it goes indented, actually the bit that is indented seems to be Phil Norton's comments, and Gareth Jenkins is commenting below. So Gareth Jenkins's words seem to be, and if we look at the penultimate paragraph and final paragraph on that page, so the bottom of that page, if we could highlight those entries, thank you. He says, it's not practical to explain exactly which figures are wrong and which are correct on the final report. However, it's restricted entirely to the stock levels of volume stock, i.e. the second part of the BTS. From the examples we've seen, it's likely to be many of the stock levels are wrong and the figures will be too high, so indicating that the branch's stock levels should be higher than they really ought to be. Do you remember being satisfied by that kind of an explanation, that it's not practical to explain exactly which figures are wrong?
Was I put onto the distribution list for this one?
Well, you do appear in the chain later on, so you certainly did receive this within the chain.
My view is that this would be looked at by Phil and by Will's team, so Will or Barry, to ascertain exactly what's going on and whether that's acceptable, and they would determine its acceptability or not by consulting others. As I said, the head of PMBA, for example, to make sure there is no financial risk.
Can we just actually zoom out? You are in fact on this particular email. You're there. You're one of the copy recipients.
Yeah.
So at the bottom there, again, we move to Phil Norton's email, which says, given the legal status of these reports, this is the issue that you had previously raised.
And I asked into it all on my original question.
Exactly. The final, are often used in court proceedings when we're trying to recover monies from dismissed sub-postmasters and the potential integrity challenges that could be levelled against the HNG system as a result of any differences. POL need assurance from Fujitsu that they will explain the cause of the problem and prove the system has integrity should we be challenged. And Gareth Jenkins's response on that is, I understand this, though I would have, I think that must be thought, most legal proceedings would be based on the first part of the report, which covers cash levels rather than the second part. And then we have, again, Phil Norton's email. I know this is not your area, however, in order to help us get concurrence from our finance team, we do need the commitment. I know Mark has asked Chris for that assurance. Is that Mark yourself?
Probably. Don't know for sure.
However, dependent upon the outcome of the meeting schedule with POL Finance on Monday, we may need to request more specific assurances. And Gareth Jenkins' response is, I'll leave others to respond to that. And there's another point that he's responding to, which from Phil Norton said, would you please advise who within FS would be, that's Fujitsu, would be in a position to provide the assurances / agree to any such request. Gareth Jenkins again says that he will leave that to others. Can we look at page 1 of that email chain, please? This is followed up by an email from Phil Norton to Alan Dalvarez. Thank you very much. You're copied into that. And he says, Alan, further to the correspondence detailed below, I have now met with our finance team to discuss this issue and to establish their position regards any requirements that they have to ensure POL does not incur additional I think that must mean exposure, as a result of this defect. As previously stated, the final balance report is a legal document, and as such, POL rely on the accuracy and integrity of the report during any legal action we undertake to recover monies from the sub-postmasters. Given the trial report can be printed several times, usually following stock adjustments made during the balancing process, this has no standing from a legal perspective. Based on this, and the understanding of the defect, how it arose, and the proposed rectification as proposed by Gareth, our finance team requires certain specific deliverables from Fujitsu in order for them to be able to manage the risk this poses and give them confidence to support the continued rollout of HNG. The deliverables that are required include, and they want a list of all products where the volumes on the final balance differ, and they want a definitive statement explaining how it's happened, etc. They also want a commitment to support POL improving the integrity of the system, that's number 5. And over the page, POL legal to sign off the Fujitsu definitive statement as fit for purpose. There are several internal processes that will be implemented to ensure any impact is minimised. However, I do need Fujitsu's agreement to the above to gain the support of our financial teams. Was the fact that the final balance that was produced by Horizon Online at this stage, that it was inaccurate, was that a serious issue for the Post Office?
Absolutely. I think, as you can see, from the investigation that was done of it.
And the workaround that had been suggested, that the final balance was simply discarded, was that appropriate? Was that considered appropriate by the Post Office?
Well, they're not, based on the above comments, no. And that's why I asked Phil to check with PMBA, because they're the owners of the financial integrity.
Do you think that Fujitsu were taking the legal implications of this serious enough?
I'd like to think so. I mean, in my discussions with them, I never had any reason to doubt that, so I'd like to think they were taking that seriously. But without seeing how they responded to this, it'd be interesting to see what their response was. But certainly in my discussions with Alan, he would always, absolutely support, what we were trying to do to make sure this was really of good quality.
It's quite significant, of course, that a document that might be used in legal proceedings is inaccurate in showing the final balance. How far up within the Post Office do you think that this issue was raised?
I honestly cannot tell you. It doesn't have to be raised anywhere unless we were put under pressure from Fujitsu to accept their workaround. From everything I've read so far, we did absolutely the right thing. I asked Phil to look into it with PMBA, as I say, who own the financial integrity. They've given us a very clear statement that they need to understand and be able to have absolute definitive proof that the integrity of the data is not compromised in any way, and also ensure our legal team sign off to that effect. Really important to us and them, that this is, absolutely integrity is at the heart of it.
The workaround is not relying on the final report and having some sort of side assurance that everything is okay. Given that people were prosecuted by the Post Office, do you think that was sufficient?
Well, sorry, I don't believe we went live with this workaround.
But do you think that attitude of reliance on a side statement rather than fixing the problem then and there was sufficient?
I think that's an unfair question, to be brutally honest. I think Fujitsu were proposing a potential workaround. At no point do they saying this workaround has to be accepted. they were proposing what they deemed a potential workaround. Clearly, it set alarm bells in my head when I saw it. Hence, I asked who'd agreed to it and asked Phil to look into it. You know, I don't see anything on here that's, you know, there's a little bit where, you know, he's trying to explain why he thinks it's okay, but clearly doesn't have the full understanding of the significance of the final balance statement in any potential legal proceedings. So I don't see any pressure from them. You know, clearly in hindsight, it wasn't a good proposal, and as such, I believe it was rejected on this basis.
Given the significance of post office's ability to prosecute people based on information provided to a court arising from a printout from the Horizon system, do you think that an approach that looks for workarounds is the right approach? Or do you think, for example, that should have caused the post office to take a deep look at the system?
Well, as I said to you, it set alarm bells in my head. A deep look at the system. This is one specific issue that arose. That absolutely we were trying to do the right thing to make sure that it was resolved.
How would this information be cascaded down to individual branches?
Well, it wouldn't be, because as I said, unless you're going to tell me we went live with it, which I don't believe we did, and I'll be surprised if we did. You know, why would we cascade it? Because we'd expect it to be fixed.
Your suggestion, though, was to make sure that it was on the known error log, so that any sub-postmasters who phoned in the message somehow would be linked.
No. Can you put my words back on the screen, please?
Yes, so it's the same document, and it is page 9.
So my words don't say that. You know, my words say, first of all, who's it being agreed with? You know, this is a legal document, so it instantly registering my concern about it. And there's a difference between a trial and a final. You know, if we were to go ahead with anything like this, you know, we would expect, if CS is customer service, I don't know, but certainly a known error log if it was agreed. And as I said, I don't know. My first question is, who has agreed to it? And then, as you see, I asked Phil to determine if it's acceptable. And that's what leads to all the investigation that says it's not acceptable. So you wouldn't have a known error log for something that we're not accepting, because actually we'd be asking for Jitsu to fix it.
It's the attitude that I'd like to drill down on, really, because we're talking about very early days of Horizon Online here. And there is a problem with the balance, the final balance. And what you're saying there is that you would expect there to be a known error log if it was agreed, so that any sub-postmaster who calls in the two would be linked. But what about all those sub-postmasters who don't call in?
But sorry, you know, it's not about being able to explain it. It's about being absolutely 100% certain it's got integrity. And that's what I said at the beginning. It's absolutely critical that the system had integrity and we could support that integrity. And hence I asked Phil to look at that. And there's no way we would have proceeded without the system having integrity.
But where there were problems in the system, known problems, was the attitude to have a known error log for the problem, to be able to explain the position to any sub-postmaster who calls in. Was that a common response to problems, that put it on the error log and all will be okay?
No, I think that is really not a fair reflection at all. A known error log is more for things that are genuine workarounds that have no real impact. It's almost back to my font example. It's things that do not impact the sub-postmaster, do not impact a counter clerk, do not impact, any of our clients at the time. They're just things that, are, shall we say, not quite, as we expect them to be, but aren't causing any financial or other material impact or questioning of integrity. And we wouldn't proceed with it. We wouldn't have something on the known error log for something that is an integrity question.
So if the known error log did have things that were more significant than just the font issue, that affected the real lives of sub-postmasters, would that have been poor practice and unexpected by yourself?
Font example is a very, very simplistic example. A known error log will contain certain scenarios, and they're generally what are classed as low-level issues that will be fixed over time. But they shouldn't have any impact on the integrity of the system. If they have impact on the integrity of the system, I would be surprised if they're on the known error log.
Can we look at poll 000329999, please? Thank you very much. This is the same period, so we're looking here at the 23rd of February of 2010. This is the acceptance report for HNGX. Can we look at page 12 of this? Just to look at the external distribution, you're on the list there as having received this document. Can we look at page 12, and it's paragraph 1.3 that I'd like to look at. Sorry, it may be slightly earlier than that, maybe the page before. Thank you very much. Acceptance decision. Could we highlight the acceptance decision? I'm just going to read that. It says the AG3 Acceptance Board was held on the 21st of January 2010 and approval to proceed through AG3 was granted. The decision stated that it was agreed that the high priority fixes in Reset 4 to be delivered as part of the maintenance release 0108 could constitute high severity AI if not delivered in time for the high volume pilot. This is something that we discussed earlier. As such, qualified acceptance was agreed, subject to the successful delivery of the high priority items in Reset 4. Whilst not an exact match, this was the closest to the Acceptance Board Recommendation 3, proceed at risk through the acceptance gateway. These associated conditions were discussed at the corresponding Release Authorization Board and recorded in the minutes of that meeting. Do you recall, in terms of the acceptance of Horizon Online, that it was effectively proceed at risk, as in there were still some concerns, but the agreement was to proceed despite some concerns?
But the concerns are not to do with anything that is high severity and therefore not an integrity question. And it does clearly call out there that yet a number could combine to form a high severity if whatever the fix was didn't actually complete successfully, and therefore we'd end up pausing it again if that was the situation.
Can we look at the bottom of page 9 of this document? It may be the bottom of page 8. Yes, that's the right one. The bottom of this page says, it should be noted that there are also defects that are not linked to poll requirements and which are not the subject of acceptance incidents. A separate assessment of the status and significance of these has been undertaken, and this will be available for consideration at the Release Authorisation Board. Are you able to assist us with that at all, that there were defects that weren't linked to poll requirements?
Not specifically. I can't think what would be a defect that wouldn't be specifically covered, other than going back to my font example, which probably wasn't a specific requirement, but other than things like that, I'd have to see some examples to recall that.
Okay. Can we look at FUJ 0009425? This document, when it comes up, goes back to the issue we were talking about a moment ago. This is an internal Fujitsu document, and it has the recipient there was the General Counsel at Fujitsu. And it says that the issue has been flagged as critical to fix before the start of rollout. This is the branch trading statement issue that we talked about a moment ago. And there's a draft email there from Jeff Butts. It's a draft response to the post office. So it's essentially responding to that request for assurance, and it's a draft of that. If we could scroll down, it's drafted to Phil, and it says, for example, the problem description, it says, on the final report, the stock holding figures in the second section of the report are incorrect on the final balance. So that's the problem that we've already talked about. And it provides the reassurance that is asked for. If we look over the page, it has key questions and answers. Can Fujitsu provide a complete and comprehensive list of all products where the volumes on the final balance report differ from those on the trial balance report? All figures relating to the volume stock holdings can be corrupted by the bug, but not necessarily all the figures will be incorrect. If we go down, how has the defect arisen? It's a software issue. What is Fujitsu doing to resolve the defect? Fujitsu has developed a software fix that resolves the issue by ensuring that the final report uses the original data retrieved by the counter at step 2, described above, rather than using the data left after step 4. This is a counter fix that is currently scheduled to be delivered within the next maintenance release for HNGX 0108. In the short term, before the fix is deployed into live, Fujitsu has written a known error log which includes instructions to the HSD to give advice to postmasters. The advice is to use the trial report, which is correct, and to discard the final report. So this is something, again, we were talking about earlier, and it was your suggestion in your email that it certainly needed, if accepted, to go onto the known error log. And the workaround there seems to be to rely on that earlier statement and not the final report. So you rely on the trial report, not the final report. It seems certainly from this that was the position and that was agreed at that time.
Where's it saying it was agreed? I think this
this is certainly the intention here seems to be to respond to the request that was made to Fujitsu. Is your evidence that it wasn't agreed, or that you don't recall it was agreed, or something else?
Well, all I know is the previous email from Phil said it wouldn't be agreed without all these caveats being put in place. I've yet to see all those caveats being answered in this draft email.
Well, let's look at the final entry. It says, can Fujitsu provide a commitment to support POL improving the integrity of the system in any subsequent legal action, specifically where the difference in the two reports is used as a means to challenge the integrity of the system? Yes, Fujitsu is willing to provide commitment to prove the integrity of the system in any subsequent legal action. Is that something that you recall ever happening?
I don't recall it ever happening. I think the one above is interesting as well and important. Please don't lose that one.
Absolutely. So it says, can Fujitsu provide a statement proving the integrity of the data is not compromised in any way and the only impact is incorrectly reported data? Fujitsu confirms that the defect relates specifically to the printing of report data and is not related in any way to the underlying branch data held in the operational HNGX system.
If you recall at the start of this section, I talked about, is it just the printout that's reporting it incorrectly, or is it the system?
Yes.
By that, it sounds like it's just the printout, not the actual system. But as I said, we still need to go on because I still haven't seen, yes, they've said they're willing to provide a legal assurance to the integrity. There's still more missing for me, because this would go to Phil. Phil would, take it to the finance team and also to our internal lawyers for advice.
Yes. I mean, if this had been accepted as the means to get around the issue, do you think it would be a bit shoddy, or would it be satisfactory to provide this kind of workaround where you rely on a trial report, not a final report, and then you have Fujitsu provide a statement in criminal or civil proceedings saying that everything's fine?
I think if it is just the printout that is correct, and Fujitsu have proven and demonstrated that, and the integrity of the system has been absolutely proven to be 100%, then I think it is reasonable. It's not ideal, but it is reasonable. But as I said, it's proving that it is only the printout. It's proving that, the system does maintain full integrity.
Would the attitude of the post office be that they had to rely on Fujitsu in those circumstances to guarantee those kinds of assurances that you've just talked about?
No, I think you'll recall on Phil's email, he wanted assurance from our finance team and from our lawyers.
Yes, but who would be able to prove the integrity of the system? Were you reliant on Fujitsu, or would that be a joint effort?
We would run various tests to prove, and produce examples whereby the report was incorrect, but we proved the data, underlying system data, was still at the integrity.
Now, we've seen certainly at the Fujitsu end that this has gone to the General Counsel. Do you recall how high up this particular issue went within the post office?
I don't recall now.
Can we go to FUJ 000944472? This is the notes from the Horizon Next Generation Joint Progress Meeting of the 11th of March 2010. Can we look at the bottom of page 3 into page 4, please? Thank you. At the bottom of that page, PN is Phil Norton.
Yep.
It says their trial report final balance issue. PN to check if the proposed workaround is acceptable to the, if we could scroll down, to the business permanent fix targeted for R1.08. However, this is dependent on the acceptability of the workaround. It may need to be a hot fix. What was a hot fix?
So Fujitsu would do releases. I can't remember how often they would do a release. Maybe once a week, maybe once a fortnight. A hot fix is where they put a fix in between that because we deemed it urgent.
GB will also prepare a statement that confirms the legality/integrity of the trial balance report if this needs to be used. So that's the draft of which we saw earlier, or document relating to that we saw earlier. Can we scroll up again so that we can look at the next entry. It says Poll have requested, 25th of February, Poll have requested that this be a hot fix as it is required before we migrate any further branches. Fujitsu to ensure deliverables listed in PN email dated 24th of Feb for current live branches are included. 4th of March, GB has received feedback on integrity statement from Fujitsu Legal. Info will be forwarded to PN. 11th of March, PN has passed statement to PMBA. You were talking about PMBA earlier, weren't you? Can you remind us who they were?
I can't remember what the P stands for. I think it's pensions and business accounting, or I can't remember what the P stands for. It's basically the central finance team who look after the cash accounting data and reconciling with the clients, etc.
Who are reviewing with Poll legal team. PN will feed back to GB. Do you recall at all how this issue ended?
I don't recall how the issue ended, no. And if you note, I wasn't at this particular meeting.
Had you moved into a different position by then, or were you just no longer involved in that particular issue?
From the top, I'd given my apologies. I was actually on holiday at this point.
Thank you. Can we look at FUJ 00094471? Thank you. This is a Post Office highlight report, 17th of March 2010. It has your name at the top there. It says that it's the third paragraph down. It says Fujitsu are now providing evidence to Poll which indicates an improvement in stability, and therefore the pilot has been scheduled to restart this week as agreed by the Poll Internal Release Authorization Board on the 17th of March. And then it goes on to talk about high volume of calls to the help desk. It says the average number of calls per Horizon online branch remains significantly higher than that of the Horizon branches, and the concern remains that the HSD will fail to cope with a significant increase in migrated branches. And if we look down an entry that relates to quality, this is all 6 days later, and it seems as though the pilot is restarting, and these are the issues that are still occurring. Screen freezes, and it says the rate of screen freezes and recoveries has been greater than expected. User opinion, it then says number of calls, as I just explained, to the HSD. The rate of calls from Horizon Online branches is significantly higher from Horizon branches. You're not aware whether the branch report issue had been resolved by this stage?
I'd have thought it would have been if it isn't mentioned explicitly, but
there were still, at that stage, other issues, despite the pilot having resumed.
well, and that's what makes me infer that it was resolved. But again, I wouldn't have been around at this time because I know by the dates I was aware.
Looking back at all the things that we've been looking at, do you think that HNGX, Horizon Online, was rolled out too soon?
No, I regard we did the appropriate testing. We did validate the integrity fully before we migrated. We stopped in the event of any suggestion there was any issue that impacted integrity or anything else that couldn't be explained. You know, as I said, I personally brought in the NFSP, National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, to form part of our, we brought them into the testing so they could actually get directly involved in the testing, but also part of our release authorization process. And they were party to every decision to proceed.
Can we look at poll 000228842, please? This is Appendix 2 to the judgment of Mr. Justice Fraser, and it lists or summarises bugs, errors and defects in Horizon. And can we go to the second page of that? And there's the summary of bugs, errors, and defects. I'm just going to take you through the bugs, errors, or defects that relate to Horizon Online. We have there number 1, receipts and payments mismatch bug. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. The bug occurred in 2010. The majority of incidents are recorded as occurring between August and October 2010. Number 3, suspense account bug. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. It's identified years of effect are 2010 to 2013. Number 4, Dalmellington bug / branch outreach issue. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. Its effects were experienced between 2010 and 2015. Number 5, Remingin bug. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. It was present for about 5 months in 2010 between March and August. Number 7, local suspense account issue, not the same as 3, suspense bug, account bug. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. This was reported in 2010 and recorded as fixed in September 2010. Number 8, recovery issues. These are bugs, errors, and defects present in Horizon Online with years of effect from 2010 to 2018. Over the page, number 13, withdrawn stock discrepancies. This is a bug present in Horizon Online, mentioned in 2010 and 2011. Number 14, bureau discrepancies. This is a bug present in Horizon Online. It arose in 2017. Down to number 19. Post and go / TA discrepancies in PulseApp. This is a bug present in Horizon Online, occurred in 2012. Recovery failures. This arises under Horizon Online. This is referable to Horizon Issue 4 and not Horizon Issue 1. 2 of the peaks show errors and defects. They do not show bugs. Mentioned in 2010, 2012, 2015. Over the page to number 23, please. Bureau de change. This is a bug present in both Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online, arose in 2005, 2006, and 2010 onwards. 25, Leica top-up bug. This is a bug present in Horizon Online, occurred in August 2010. Number 28, drop and go. This is a bug present in Horizon Online, occurred in July 2017. The date of the KEL suggests HNG-A, but the KEL is expressly headed HNG-X. You were asked to specifically address a list of bugs in your statement, but you didn't address these bugs. Is there a reason why you didn't address these bugs in your statement?
I didn't know I was expected to address these bugs in my statement, but all I would say is there's far too little information on these for me to make a comment on them. You know, it doesn't tell me what the actual bug is. It just says there's a bug present. For example, like a top-up, it just says there's a bug present in Horizon Online. It doesn't tell me what the nature of that bug is. You know, whether it was, you know, if you recall back, one of the things I said to you was, you know, you don't develop a system, deploy it, and that's it. You're constantly making improvements to that system, be that new products, be that changes in how we operate products, etc. And therefore, there's always a risk that bugs do creep in, and that's why you have to, you know, keep testing it and, you know, keep on top of it. But on none of these have I got sufficient information to be able to comment on them, I'm afraid.
Do I take it from that you didn't follow any of the court proceedings relating to Horizon?
Well, I followed bits of it, but, you know, I didn't follow in detail. You know, I looked on from afar.
You were given a specific list in your Rule 9 request that identified bugs and asked to comment on them. And can we take you to your response? It's WITN 03850100. That's your statement, and take you to paragraph 19. Page 5. You said there, I had confidence in HNGX throughout in terms of the development and testing process, but we were deploying a system to over 10,000 branches, and some bugs had been identified. And whilst they were fixed, naturally there was some noise, as we were very open and honest with the NFSP. Ultimately, their support was a vital part of our rollout. I mean, there was a bit more than some noise, wasn't there, in terms of the number of bugs that I've just taken you to, the implications of it all? Do you think, again, you've minimised the issues in your statement?
Well, no, sorry, let me explain to you how I've answered this question. You know, the documents I received were several thousand pages. And as I said to you, you know, some of those bugs are well after Horizon HNGX was rolled out. Some of those, you know, and therefore presumably introduced by a subsequent release. None of those bugs have enough detail for me to comment on. And I'll be commenting from, you know, a guesswork, and that's totally the wrong thing to do. You know, I've never said there weren't bugs in the system. As I said, of course, that there was noise. We managed it very closely with as I said, we involved the Federation of Sub-Postmasters in all our decisions. We worked with them. You know, they were very much part of the team that agreed, you know, in terms of any known errors, would we go live with them? Absolutely, they were part and parcel of my team. Yes, I'm still here.
Thank you. Is your evidence that after rollout, there weren't significant bugs that were drawn to your attention that addressed issues that affected the cash account and affected the lives of sub-postmasters?
So I can truthfully say that from the point we rolled out HNGX, Horizon Online, that I wasn't aware of any bugs that impacted the integrity of the system. I wasn't aware of them. I'm being very specific.
And they weren't drawn to your attention by anybody?
Well, no, and in part probably because I'd left the post office by then.
Well, let's say the rollout of Horizon Online was 2010. After 2010, did anybody draw to your attention significant errors or bugs with Horizon Online that affected the cash accounts of sub-postmasters?
Not to my knowledge, no. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but not to my knowledge, no.
Can we look at poll 000296118, please? And it's page 2. This is an email from Ron Warmington of Second Sight to Simon Baker. Do you know who either Ron Warmington or Simon Baker are?
I've no idea who Ron is. I think Simon, I don't know what his role was. He joined the post office before I left, but I don't know what his role was at this time.
Were you aware of an investigation being carried out by Second Sight into issues with Horizon?
I broadly recall it, but I thought it was a, you know, legacy Horizon.
We have here an email from Ron Warmington that says, Simon, this is a draft section of the report dealing with 2 defects. And he asks 2 questions. He wants to know how there were shortages, or how the shortages or surpluses that arose from certain problems were impacting on sub-postmasters. And he also wants to know when and how and who knew about those problems. And I'll take you to the extract from the interim report. And that's, if you scroll down, he has sent Simon Baker an extract from his report to assist him. It says, Pol has recently disclosed to Second Sight that in 2011 and 2012, it had discovered defects in Horizon Online that impacted 77 sub-post offices. The first defect, referred to as the receipts and payments mismatch problem, impacted 63 branches. It was discovered in September 2010 as a result of Fujitsu's monitoring of the system events, although there were subsequent calls from branches. The aggregate of the discrepancies arising from the system defect was £9,029, the largest shortfall being £777, and the largest surplus £7,044. It is not yet clear whether sub-postmasters with the surpluses profited from them or whether those showing shortages had to make them good. The second defect, referred to as the local suspense account problem, affected 14 branches and generated discrepancies aggregating to £4,486, including a shortfall of £9,800 at one branch and a surplus of £3,200 at another. Pol was unaware of this defect until a year after its first occurrence in 2011. So it's referring to issues in 2011 and 2012 that affect the cash accounts of sub-postmasters. If we go onto the page before, page 1, Simon Baker says he's sending this on, and he says, just got this from Ron. Sorry, it's further down. It's the bottom. Thank you. Just got this from Ron. I can get back to him on most of the questions, but need your help on who in Post Office knew about it. I know from the email that Rod sent that Mike Young knew, but don't know if it went any higher. This is to Leslie Sewell. Do you know who Leslie Sewell was?
Leslie Sewell was the new head of IT that was brought in shortly before I left.
Can we go to the top email from Leslie Sewell? She responds, 25th of June 2013. Simon, I don't know if it went any higher than Mike. Andy MC. Who's Andy MC?
Andy he was the head of service management. I can't remember his surname.
So I don't know if this went any higher than Mike. Andy Mook also managed the service at the time. And if I remember correctly, Mark Burley was also involved. Now, is Leslie Sewell wrong to say that you were involved?
Involved in what?
Well, he's asking who in Post Office knew about these problems.
So I think the one on receipts not equal payments we've discussed, and I didn't believe that was found when we were actually live. I thought that was found before we were live, but from the below it might have been when we were live. But the suspense one doesn't ring any bells with me at all, and certainly I wasn't informed of the 2011 one.
And did Leslie Sewell ever raise, following receipt of this email, with you, any questions about that Second Sight had raised, or any issues concerning Second Sight's report?
Nobody from the post office contacted me with anything to do with the system after I left.
So you think that the extent of your involvement was the involvement in the local, was it the receipts and payments mismatch, or the suspense account issue?
Sorry, say the question again?
So the extent of your involvement in the underlying bugs, errors or defects, you're saying that it was the first, which is the receipts and payments mismatch, or the second, which is the local suspense account problem?
No, I'm saying I remember the receipts not equal payments issue, and we did discuss that earlier.
I think we looked at that earlier in relation to Legacy Horizon rather than Horizon Online, although I may be wrong on that.
That's what I think. I'm getting confused now because I don't recall it then on this. I definitely recall it on original Horizon. But all I can say is, obviously there were defects during the development of H and GX. If we found defects that had any chance of impacting the integrity, we would make absolutely certain they would be fixed. And if that involved pausing, if that involved delay, that's what we would do.
Why do you think Leslie Sewell has mentioned you in connection with these particular defects, what are described at that time as defects?
I don't think she's saying it in connection with the defects. I think she's saying because I was program manager when she first joined.
And what would that mean? I mean, the question that's been asked here by Second Sight is, I can tell you, but it's asking who knew what when, effectively. It seems to be that you're being suggested as somebody who was involved.
Yeah, but as I'm saying to you, I don't recall being involved. As I say, the receipts and payments is an interesting one because I was clearly getting confused with the original Horizon. But, as I said, during my time as program manager, during my time as head of delivery, if any defect had come to my attention that would remotely put at risk the integrity of the system, I would have raised it and insisted it was fixed. There is absolutely no question in my head whatsoever about that.
The question in Ron Wormington's email is, can you please let me know whether, when, and who at board level was informed of the defect, and also the later local suspense account defect, and whether any press release was issued, etc. Simon Baker emails Leslie Sewell to say, I can get back to him on most of the questions, but need your help on who in post office knew about it. And then Leslie Sewell's response is, I don't know if it went higher than Mike. Andy MC also managed the service at the time, and if I remember correctly, Mark Burley was also involved. Is that recollection of Leslie Sewell wrong?
Well, I think, one, it's saying Leslie clearly knew about it, reading this, and just saying, if I remember correctly. All I'm saying is my recollection is I wasn't aware of those two specifics. But as I said, it's my recollection, at this stage, which is 12 years since I left.
Would you not have remembered such significant impact on the cash account, given how significant you have said in your evidence today that it was to the very system that you were managing?
Would I remember a specific instance? Not necessarily. Would I remember if anything was raised regarding the risk to the integrity of the cash account? Then 100% I would have insisted it was dealt with. But if you ask me, do I remember every single incident that was raised that was connected to the cash account? No, I don't.
And do you think that Leslie Sewell was wrong in naming you there?
I think that's a question you have to ask Leslie, why she named me. I don't know why she named me.
But do you think it was wrong for her to name you, given your level of involvement? Or might it actually have been right?
She's saying, if I remember correctly. Now, my view is she wasn't remembering correctly, because I don't recall those two specifics, especially, as I said, at that date. But, I can't be 100% certain, as I'm saying.
I'm going to move on very briefly before we finish to a couple of other matters. Can we look at poll 000-55100? This question relates to your involvement in matters relating to criminal proceedings. This is an email exchange of July 2010, so we're going back in time now. And rollout of Horizon Online hadn't been completed by this stage, I don't think. It concerns a disclosure request that was made by solicitors for somebody who was being prosecuted, Seema Misra. She was a defendant in criminal proceedings that related to an incident in 2008.
I vaguely remember her name, yes, I do. I mean, from the news, not from this.
So, Marilyn Benjamin, on behalf of Jarnail Singh, do you remember Jarnail Singh at all?
Not
That's the bottom email. So, it's in fact Jarnail Singh who is sending the email. You can see at the bottom over the next page. But if we highlight that bottom entry, it says, I enclose a copy of an email received from Izzy Hogg, the defence solicitors, on the 22nd of July 2010, the content of which is self-explanatory. Could you please be kind enough to let me have your urgent instructions as to the access and information she is requesting in respect of the system in the Midlands and the operation at Chesterfield and the error logs? I will contact Gareth Jenkins to find out what transpired at the meeting with Charles McLachlan. So this was essentially a disclosure request made in criminal proceedings. If we scroll up, we have Andrew Wynne. Do you know Andrew Wynne?
No. Oh,
Andrew Wynne says there, John, Rod Ismay, the head of P&BA, do you remember Rod Ismay?
I remember Rod Ismay, yep.
Yes. Is not happy at the prospect of an open-ended invite. He's asked the question of what are the legal parameters we're working with. Simplistically, if we refuse or impose conditions, do we lose the case? I think we need more guidance on how something like this might reasonably operate. And if we go up, who's John Longman?
I don't know who John Longman is.
John Longman is responding to Jarnail Singh, and he's saying, Jarnail, I've spoken to a few people regarding 3 points raised by Izzy Hogg, that's the solicitors for Seema Misra. I'm awaiting comments from Penny/Gareth at Fujitsu, but the general consensus of opinion is that these points are too vague and more information is required exactly from the defence as to what they require. Our guidance is required as per the email from Andrew Wynne below in relation to... if we scroll down, there's a key passage that I missed off there, which is the email from Andrew Wynne to John Longman, which says, I think Mark Burley would be the route into IT to identify who might be best placed to deal with this aspect.
Yep.
Why is your name being suggested in relation to this disclosure request?
Probably because at that time I was the head of delivery for IT in the post office.
And was it usual for you to have a role in relation to criminal proceedings?
I never had a role in relation to criminal proceedings. I don't even believe I was contacted in respect of this.
So why is your name being mentioned in respect of this?
I'm afraid you have to ask Andrew Wynne that.
Do you ever recall being involved or asked to assist in any way with evidence or matters relating to criminal or civil proceedings?
I don't believe I was ever asked to deal with that unless it was, sent without me knowing it was a criminal thing.
Would you be asked to produce statements or to produce, to carry out investigations or to...
No, I mean, the only thing I can recall in anything connected, and I don't know if it's connected to this or something completely different, was Rod did do a piece of work to investigate the integrity of Horizon. Now, I don't know if it was original Horizon or Horizon Online because the two blend, but Rod did an investigation into the integrity of the system at the time, whichever one it was. And I'm sure there are records of that because I'm sure it's in one of the packs that I've seen, where he confirmed that, in his view and the view of people he had looking at it, it was operating with integrity. Now, I'd have thought that was before this time, and as I said, it could even be original Horizon. As I said, I don't ever recall being consulted on anything with a legal connection like this.
So you don't recall being consulted about the second site, the matters raised by second site, and in relation to these criminal proceedings, you don't recall being...
No.
And in both times, people have proposed your name.
Yep.
Thank you. Sir, I don't have many questions left. I have about 10 minutes left. I see it's 4:30.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there will not be any or many further questions. There may be something for Mr. Whittam. I may address it very briefly.
Well, I'm reluctant for a number of reasons to go much beyond, say, 4:45. And we have got the witness remote, not in being, so to speak, so that if necessary, we could have 10 minutes, quarter of an hour in the morning. Subject to his availability, I should add, Mr. Burley.
I have no availability tomorrow. I wasn't informed that it was going to risk carrying on.
No,
I
appreciate it. Anyway, let's debate it for the moment.
Can we see how
where
we
we get with Mr. Blake?
Thank you. You've just mentioned the ISMA report. Can we go to poll 000888991, please? That report is the 2nd of August 2010, so it's actually very shortly after this email about the Seema Misra case. So Seema Misra was 27th of July 2010, the top email, and this report is the 2nd of August 2010. Was this the report that you were talking about, the Rod Ismay report?
Looks like it, yeah.
Yes, and you're copied there.
Yep.
And this is called Horizon Response to Challenges Regarding System Integrity. Do you remember why this report was produced?
I think, because of the reasons in the first paragraph.
Post Office Limited has over the years had to dismiss and prosecute a number of sub-postmasters and Crown staff following financial losses in branches. A small number of those have made counterclaims that they were not guilty of the charges made, but that Horizon system was faulty. So he was asked to produce a report that effectively defended the position, or?
No, so the first paragraph talks about, a small number claims they were not guilty of the charges, but the Horizon system, so that's the original Horizon system. But it's actually then just validating that the new system has got integrity. Obviously, you can't validate the old system had got integrity because we'd replaced it by then.
Can we scroll down to the executive summary, please? And it says there, POL has extensive controls spanning systems, processes, training and support. Horizon is robust, but like any system, depends on the quality of entries by the users. So it seems there to be suggesting that the quality of the entry of users is the issue, or the significant issue. Horizon Online builds on this and brings benefit to running costs and change management. It is not being done because of any doubt about the horizon of integrity. It then says the integrity of Horizon is founded on its tamper-proof logs, its real-time backups, and the absence of backdoors, so that all data entry or acceptance is at branch level and is tagged against the log on ID of the user. This means the ownership of the accounting is truly at branch level. Now, that wasn't correct, was it, about the absence of backdoors and everything being at branch level?
How do you mean?
Well, was that correct? Did you agree with that proposition?
To a degree, I might have worded it slightly different. To the absence of unauthorized backdoors.
So there were backdoors, but there were...
Well, any system has to be maintained, yes. So you do need, a control system such that you can go in and make appropriate, new coding, for example, etc., that needs to be done on any system. But it's that authorized backdoors that I'm emphasizing. So on Horizon Online, it was certainly always built and tested as a two-person entry. So there had to be two persons involved to make sure it had that authorization.
When you read this for the first time, did you say that bit's not right?
I didn't say it's not right. I just questioned the wording.
Who with?
Myself. I read it, you said when I read it for the first time. So when I read it for the...
You received it, 2nd of August 2010, you're copied in. On reading this, did you say, hang on a minute, what it's saying about backdoors is wrong?
I don't recall, to be honest, at that point who I raised it with. I was more interested in what were the important lessons that we had to learn from it.
The final paragraph on that page, there are several improvement opportunities for POL, and these are set out in Appendix 1. They do not undermine POL's assertion regarding the integrity of Horizon, but they would tackle some of the other noise which complainants feed on. That phrase, noise, that was something that that was a phrase that came up in your witness statement as well, that I took you to earlier. Was that a common word that was used at the post office to describe the complaints about the Horizon system?
Yeah, but only in the sense of, noise can be good or bad. So, don't interpret it as being necessarily negative. It's negative in this context. And obviously we had to take note of the noise and make sure we acted upon it. And that's one of the reasons, as I said, we had the Federation in with us, so they could help us with that noise and help us either A, understand it, or B, they would help promote the right communications that would, help alleviate the noise. One of the biggest bits of noise that we had was in the early days of deployment, because we made a conscious decision to substantially change the user interface. And because of that, we had quite a bit of what I'm going to use the term noise, because people were not used to it. But actually, very quickly, that noise died down from the users, but it almost kept a balance, because as new users came on, you got the same noise because they just weren't used to that new user interface. And it was specifically done that way because had we kept the user interface as it was, that was part of the problem with original Horizon, and why some transactions were taking longer than they needed to, because they had to navigate several screens, whereas we made it much quicker and easier to navigate to transactions.
Thank you. That's not quite the point I'm making, but I'm going to have to move on because of time. But I just ask, are you really saying that the phrase noise there is used in a neutral term, as a neutral term? Or is it being critical?
I think on this one, it's critical. It's a negative in this one.
Can we look at poll 000913884, please? This is a document from November 2010. It's an email. And it's an email from Lynn to Mike and Rod, so including to Rod Ismay. It's the second, Lynn Hobbs. If we look over the page, sorry. Who was Lynn Hobbs?
At the time, Lynn would have been probably a regional manager, I think, at the time.
She said, this is November 2010, she says, I found out this week that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. It came up when we were exploring solutions around a problem generated by the system following migration to HNGX. This issue was quickly identified and a fix put in place, but it impacted around 60 branches and meant a loss/gain incurred in a particular week in effect disappeared from the system. One solution quickly discounted because of the implications around integrity was for Fujitsu to remotely enter a value into a branch account to reintroduce the missing loss/gain. So Pol can't do this, but Fujitsu can. Was this the point you qualified earlier, that actually it is possible for Fujitsu?
Yeah, but that should have been two people doing that. I don't know, obviously, in this particular case whether it was, but it should have been.
And if we look at page 1, we have at the bottom of page 1 an email from Lynn Hobbs. She says there in the third sentence, I haven't seen anything further, but I did have a conversation with Mike and the whole remote access to Horizon issue. This was being looked into by Andy McLean and Mark Burley. Do you remember being asked to look into it at all?
I don't remember specifically being asked to look into this one now.
But do you think that's likely, or do you think your name is again being misused?
I honestly don't recall it. At the 3rd of December 2010, it could have been I was asked to, and I would have then passed that on to the then Horizon program manager, which was Will Russell, because I would have been in a head of projects role at this stage. I'd have actually given an honest answer that Fujitsu can access it as long as there's two people doing the piece to give that control.
If we look up to the top of this chain, from John Breeden. Do you know who John Breeden was? He was the National Contract Manager North Post Office. He's emailing Angela Vandenbogard. Do you remember Angela Vandenbogard?
Yes, to a degree, yes.
Yes. And who was she?
She was something in the network, but I don't know what her exact role was.
Okay. Do you recall how high up within the post office this issue of remote access and the ability of Fujitsu to remotely access the account was known?
No, don't know.
Do you think it would be higher than Angela Bogard?
I don't know what level Angela Vandenbogard was, but yes, I'd like to think so.
Having read the Ismay report in the summer...
Proven to be unauthorized access. That's the key thing here. If it's just a misunderstanding and it turns out that Fujitsu have legitimately accessed the system, then I wouldn't expect it to go higher.
having read the ISME report in the summer, and that we're now in December of 2010, did you tell anyone, hang on a minute, the ISME report, once again, this has reminded me, that bit about remote access, that's wrong?
I'm not sure why I would, because I'm not on this, am I?
Well, no, but you've been mentioned about looking into the problem, looking into the remote access. So you were in 2010, it seems, according to the email from Lynn Hobbs at the bottom of this page, charged with looking into the remote access with Horizon issue. Having looked into it, did you consider
As I said
raising
to you,
flags?
I have to look into it in December 2010.
You can't recall looking into it, did you say?
I don't recall being asked to look into it. I'm not definitively saying I was or I wasn't, but I don't recall.
Thank you. One final very small issue, and I will only take 5 minutes on this. It's the issue of training. Can we look at FUJ 50559? In your witness statement, paragraph 8, you say you can't comment on training for Legacy Horizon. There is a document that I've been asked to bring to your attention. It's the 12th of May 2000, and it's the final, at the bottom of it, it's a change control note, and it refers to you in that bottom paragraph. A number of discussions have been held to identify a suitable mechanism for delivering the results requested, and Mark Burley confirmed to John Pope by email on the 12th of May 2000 that the only change pathway was now being asked to make is one detailed below. And we go over the page. The change control note in itself isn't important. The passage that I'm going to draw to your attention is this. It's the second paragraph. This change control note is based on the assumption that to minimize costs, the training systems will not be updated. Do you recall during your involvement with Horizon, Legacy Horizon, Horizon Online, training systems not being updated because of costs issues?
I don't recall it now, and I'm surprised that it wasn't. But looking at the actual detail of the change, this was a change to a non sort of financial value cash account entry. It's not a financial entry. My guess is it's not that it won't be updated. It will not be updated at this time. I can't believe it wasn't updated, full stop.
Thank you. And the final question also relates to training. You have said in your statement, you referred to the NFSP in the context of a training and assurance with HNGX. You say that there was a test before official use of the system was approved, and that this was developed across multiple parties, including the NFSP. Can you tell us who else was involved and what, briefly, and your recollections of what the NFSP involvement in developing that was vis-a-vis any others?
Yeah, so one of the things that I put in place was we called it a tripartite way of working, and it involved the NFSP, who represented all the sub-postmasters, the CWU, and some members of my programme team. Now, on occasions, that created conflict in itself, because sometimes the CWU, who represented the directly owned branches, and the NFSP would have different priorities. But they were all involved in putting together the testing, which my business change team would have led, and probably, I can't recall exactly, but probably undertook that testing to assure it was fit for purpose, would be my guess that they got involved with.
And put very simply, what was the difference between the NFSP and the CWU in very simple terms, to the best of your recollection?
Well, the difference is a priority of things, because it depends on how their members get paid. So the NFSP might want to prioritise a transaction to a higher screen than the CWU, because their members get a higher payment for it. Whereas for the CWU, you do more of transaction X, which wasn't as important to be higher up on the federation, because they didn't get paid as much for it. It was always resolved amicably. We had discussions, we had good, it was just that, one of the examples that I recall where there was a conflict.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whittam has a brief comment or question.
So given the hour, a document's been referred to, we can address the issues we want to address at a later stage. I don't need to ask any questions.
Yeah. I think that we've now run our course, Mr. Blake, and if anybody did have any further questions, I was going to say that they would have to submit them to me first so that I could decide whether it was necessary to ask them. And if I so decided, we'd have to arrange with Mr. Burley when he could be asked them. There's a limit for both him and the transcriber, and I have to say, me, as I get older, after 4:30 is quite difficult. Mr. Burley, that's it. Thank you for coming to give evidence, and I suspect that we won't trouble you further, but that's not an absolute guarantee, all right? Because I have cornered people into being quiet for the moment.
Yeah, well, any help I can give.
Right, fine.
Yep.
Tomorrow, Mr. Blake?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fine.